I'm noting the time and the presence of a quorum, so I now call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. We are headed into election season. The Acton Town election is March 26th. We have a contested race in Acton. Shall I?
Somebody gave me an East Sports article.
Okay. The Boxborough deadline to submit papers is April 2nd. Their election is going to be held on May 21st. Does anyone know if anyone has pulled papers in Boxborough? Yes. Wonderful. Okay. Terrific.
One person has pulled so far. There might be a second person, but
Okay. In Acton, we have Ginny is running for you were still running for your seat. Yes, I got that right. Okay. And Eileen is running, and John Peterson is also running. And there's another person?
John Peterson pulled papers.
Someone
There's
else?
a fourth. Oh,
Okay. Okay. We have three warrants to read. Vendor warrant 19-016 and 016PR in the total amount of $2,057,669.06, and payroll warrant P1916 in the amount of $2,531,444.12. In your packet, you will find the business meeting minutes from January 10th and from Budget Saturday, January 26th. I'm going to assume everyone looked those over, and if there are any comments. Yes, Beth.
On page 4 of the January 10th minutes, there was a correction on the second paragraph. It should be budget
Do I hear a motion to approve?
so moved. Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. We will now suspend the business meeting, and I call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee budget hearing to order. So I don't know if you've seen the beacon from last week, but in the beacon there is a legal notice that publicizes our hearing, and actually just coincidentally also the Minuteman Tech budget hearing. This is a requirement of Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 38N. It requires that we do publish a notice of a public hearing. This is our formal and legislated final solicitation to the public for to be heard for or against the whole or any part of the proposed budget. That's right from the statute. Our budget is, as you know, very large in size and scope, and a lot of the work that results in the budget presentations that we get here at school committee throughout the fall and into the winter, and culminating in Budget Saturday, happens because of the discussions and the collaboration between subcommittees and the senior leadership team and other stakeholders. These meetings are open to the public, and I want to take a moment to thank especially the budget subcommittee members, Michael, Eileen, Tessa, Amy, and Mary. I feel really lucky to have worked with such smart and savvy, thoughtful, diligent people with incredible insight and perspectives, and critical thinkers throughout the process, which every year makes this district better than it was last year. Paul?
So I received a comment from a member of the public about, Budget Saturday just appearing like it's a rubber stamp to the committee just agreeing to what is presented. But I wanted to point out the thing is, we really don't want the committee in February to be, arguing over budget items just before we're about to send the warrant in. That's why a number of years ago we started the budget subcommittee just for this reason, to have open discussion about budget items through the year. And so what I might suggest, though, because what I realize is the public really doesn't get the benefit of the discussion and the deliberation that happens in subcommittee, I might suggest that maybe next year we have whoever's chair of the budget subcommittee as we report through the year, just to give an insight as to what the discussion items were, so that the general public gets the benefit of the fact, understands that there is deliberation that goes on, and it just doesn't happen on budget Saturday. So just a suggestion that we might want to talk about for the workshop.
And I would just add that it does happen on Budget Saturday. It happens also, and I think more intensely, in the subcommittee, at the subcommittee level. Yeah. Adam?
Yeah, and recognizing that the capital expenditures or the capital items on the budget for this year take up a pretty large portion of the items we discussed, I just wanted to recognize the subcommittee that worked on that, including Diane, Paul, myself from the school committee, but also members of the both towns' finance committees and representatives from the administration. And in fact, we contracted in with an outside supplier to really provide us some best-in-class consulting services around how to develop the plan. We met I believe five or six times leading up to Budget Saturday to really put together that comprehensive capital plan with a lot of consultation between, like I said, both towns and the members of the committee.
Thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to Peter to present an overview of the FY20 budget.
All right, so thank you, everyone. I know I was very nervous heading into tonight. I want to thank Marie for helping to steer me in the right direction. She basically said, the superintendent's role tonight is just to go through each slide from Budget Saturday and recap what that was. That's correct? No? I will not do that. But thank you, Marie. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to get people to laugh about money, so just like it is hard to find a good quote. So I thought, just to give you a sense of the process, this is our fifth full school committee meeting where we're doing a budget presentation. Just to give you a scope of the timeline of how we've approached the various presentations here. So this is my final budget recommendation to you. It is unchanged from what we had on Budget Saturday. This is also our public hearing and an opportunity for the community to weigh in on the budget, and we're hoping to have your vote tonight as well. So just to summarize what I think Paul and Adam just talked about a little, this budget development process was not a 5-meeting process. This was actually a 19-meeting process that took place over the course of the entire fall and winter seasons. So we had 8 budget subcommittee meetings that worked through this process. We had 6 capital subcommittee meetings devoted to this process, and again, this is the 5th of our 5 full school committee meetings in the process. You can see some of the meeting dates, but I also wanted to recognize the committee members because your guidance and help in helping us establish the priorities and talking through how we might fund those was absolutely invaluable in bringing this to the full committee, so thank you, everyone. So just to give you, these are some of the slides that you've seen, but what I wanted to do for people who may not have been able to see some of the previous presentations, just highlight some really key elements of what we were trying to do. This budget does propose the addition of 8.6 additional FTE personnel, and if you remember, we allocated those within 5 major spending categories. One category were those strategic additions that continue multi-year plans already in place. So for example, those were our coaches to be able to continue that curriculum work with our teachers. They were also the team chair position. We also had additions that supported the implementation of our district's proposed capital plan. This is one thing, and I know a couple committee members had expressed some concerns to school committee members around this position. This was something I just wanted to take a moment to address because I think it's important for transparency. When we proposed this position, we did so within a specific context, that we were in the middle of the feasibility study for a building project, and we knew that if that passes, we're going to be breaking ground on, really what will be a 3-year project from start to completion for multi-million-dollar facility. That takes a considerable amount of time and energy for a facilities director to be able to be the voice of the district on the ground daily on the construction site. We also know that what we're proposing is a $20 million capital plan, and we're doing that because we got behind in capital over the years because it was underfunded. And then we also know our current operation structure, where we have one person responsible for all of the operations on the transportation side of the district and on the facilities side of the district. So in order to be able to execute the plan, we just simply didn't have the staff in the existing operations of the district to do that. It's always my priority, and I think our district's priority, to propose positions that have a direct impact on teaching and learning, but there are times when we need to make sure that we have the support positions in place to make sure that the work we need to do gets done. So that was the reason we wanted to propose that position. We also had staff necessary to meet increasing needs of our students who are supported through IEPs, specifically in the area of social emotional learning. We talked about some of the BCBAs, some of the counseling position at the high school, some of the special education positions and psychologist positions we're proposing. We also had additions to the budget that we needed to put in to support a nursing grant that we lost. There was a $60,000 grant, if you remember, that is no longer able to be used for staffing purposes. We need to keep the staffing in place, so we just have to absorb that cost. And then finally, we also had a number of positions that we were able to achieve through shifting of resources. Those included some of our library media specialists, that included the full-time music teacher for the junior high school and Acton elementary schools. So, and then it also included the custodian, floating custodian, and we're achieving that through a reduction in overtime pay. So we really wanted to take a reasonable approach to how we added some of these positions. Our second big category were budgetary additions to support the district's work around equity, and we detailed those at length in the presentation. I won't talk too much about that. And then the third major addition was making sure that we created and implemented a capital plan. This was something that was clearly a priority to the committee when I came on board. Had been probably 5 years in the making, and so we wanted to make sure that we could implement something that was sustainable and achieve the goals set out by that group. I want to talk a little bit now about the capital plan, because this is probably the part of the budget with the most complexity to it, and some of the nuances, because we're asking for 3 votes that will support this work. So there were 4 major elements to the capital plan, if you remember. One was the development of the actual project scope and sequence. We needed to figure out how we got from the $120 million in the Doran Whittier study down to what we're proposing as a $20.5 million process. We did that largely through elimination of redundant projects, elimination of some of the major building projects like the Douglas and Gates Elementary School project, the work that needs to be done at Conant, because the major repairs have now been done at Conant, but now we have to have a long-term vision for that facility. We took out the maintenance shed, we took out the administration building, and then we really looked at making sure we had accurate project costs. We also, within that, wanted to look at those items that we could seek either grant funding or reimbursement through the MSBA for. So later tonight, we're also asking for your vote on a statement of interest to submit for the Blanchard work. That is one of the high priority projects in the job. The second major component was to make sure we increase the operating budget to be able to fund the needed facilities improvements. So we again proposed an additional $250,000 increase to the capital operating budget. That will take it from $1 million, which is our current fiscal year appropriation, up to $1.25 million. Just as a preview, we anticipate also coming to you next year at this time and asking for another $250,000 to increase that to a level that we think is sustainable. At that time forward, our current recommendation is we would hope to increase that at a rate of 2.5% per year over the life of the plan. A third arm of this, or leg, however you want to view the various body parts that go into capital planning, is a borrowing strategy. We simply do not have enough funds to be able to complete the work that needs to be done, and if we continue to delay work on the projects, we will never get these projects done at a time before the systems actually start to fail and cost us more money to replace. So what we're proposing is to take out a bond within the operating budget. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. It is not a debt exclusion. It is a bond that will be repaid within the operating budget. Finally, there's a proposal to establish a stabilization fund, because as we continue to invest in our capital program throughout the district, what we need to do is be able to establish a savings program for that, so that in the event a major system fails, We have a savings account that we can pay for that system to be repaired or replaced without breaking the rest of the capital plan. We also know that there's projects in the later years of the capital plan which we will not be able to fund unless we can save over multiple years to be able to get there. The Parker Damon roof being probably the most notable of those. We expect that probably to come in around $3 to $4 million, somewhere in that range. That exceeds our annual operating budget for capital, so we need to save money in a stabilization fund. So some of the key funding details of the bond that we're proposing, just to make sure we're clear about that and transparent. Again, we are increasing the capital budget in FY20 to $1.25 million, and we'll propose again to go to $1.5 the following year. That'll give us just about $2.75 million available through the operating for capital work in the first 2 years of this plan. We are also intending to borrow $7.5 million to support this plan, is our final proposed amount. We arrived at that really by balancing priorities. If we bonded more money, that means our repayment would be higher, and we would jeopardize what we had on an annual basis to continue the capital work. If we bonded less money, we didn't have enough money available to complete the projects we needed. So it was really a balancing act, not only to make sure we had money available for the projects we need to do, but also to be able to make sure we could continue to fund the rest of our program in the district at a level that we were comfortable with in the long term. I don't know if I said this before, I think I did, and I think I've said this in multiple times. This bond is repaid within the district's operating budget, and it is not a debt exclusion. I don't know, it might appear somewhere else on this slide too. The bond plus the budget that we're allocating will bring us about $10 million for capital improvements in the first 2 years of this plan. And then we'll have an additional roughly $10 million over the remaining 12 years of the plan to continue capital improvements throughout the district. Our debt is repaid through the district's operating budget. This is not a debt exclusion. It was subtle too, by the way, when I got to that point. In order to do this and to authorize debt, this will require an approval of the school committee and a 2/3 vote at both the Acton and Boxborough town meetings. So you need to approve it by majority tonight, and then at town meeting it will require a 2/3 vote from both communities. This also allows us to address identified projects within the next 2 years, and it maintains our capacity within the operating budget for newly identified projects over the remaining life of the plan. We did allocate, and it changes over time, but between $100,000 and $200,000 over time per year for projects that principals bring forward that they need done or they'd like to see done in their building, because we want to make sure that that work doesn't stop. The Regional Stabilization Fund was another nuanced piece of this proposal. This was based on a 2016 law that changed, which allowed regional districts to establish capital stabilization funds. DESE issued an advisory, and just of note that if you establish a capital fund, it should be based on the district's long-range capital plan. That is what we're proposing tonight, so we feel like we're in accordance with that. Our auditors had a recent statement in one of their reports to us that they believe this was a prudent means of capital budgeting, strategically targeting financial reserves in an appropriately transparent manner. If you remember, the capital plan that we sent out and has been circulated in both towns shows how we will use that stabilization fund over the 12-year life of the plan. And it shows inflows, outflows to stabilization as we intend them. It also has the potential to augment our resources as identified in the capital plan bonding proposal. It also creates a safety net, as I said before, by addressing the perceived concerns around minimal available funding in future years of the capital plan. And then finally, we have started to float this with both towns, and it has been generally received favorably in both communities. So I just want to end with that. So my summary for the night, what does this budget do, and what are our accomplishments through the budget? I believe that this maintains our existing services. It also grows our programs and our services in alignment with the various stated goals. And if you remember on Budget Saturday, we tried to go to great lengths to speak to you about how proposed budget aligned with the various goals we have. It maintains reasonable class size in accordance with your policies. It also strives to deliver the resources necessary to meet the needs of all of our students and programs and the various services that students require. And then it also preserves and enhances our commitment to some of our operational areas, including OPEB and capital improvements. So again, final budget numbers for anyone who just wants to make sure we're all on the same page before we vote on this and hear from the community. In the opposite order, So the total budget is $90,982,111. That represents a 2.55% overall budgetary increase. We are using some of the E&D to offset that, just remember that. And so with the use of E&D, that makes the Acton percent change at 2.09%, and in the Boxborough, the change is 1.51%. And that, I will turn over.
Okay. We will now take input from school committee members before we move to public participation. So, Paul?
Thank you, Peter. If we could go back to slide 6. I don't think it actually has a number. It's the one before 7. No, the one before that. That's the one. First bullet there, we have increased budget capital FY20 1.25 and FY21 1.5 is 2.75 million. So that 2.75 million, just want to clarify, is just the total, is the 2-year total of those budget items over the 2 years.
Yes.
It's not to say that after FY21, the budget will have 2.75 million as the line item.
That is absolutely correct. So once we get to the $1.5 million funding level, at that point, we would recommend increasing that funding level at a rate of 2.5% per year.
Any other comments? Michael?
I just want to get a clarification or confirmation from you, Peter, about the stabilization fund and the bond we're going to borrow. So I remember that, not in this slides, but remember that in the our last capital, not the capital, the budget meeting. So we saw the table that in the couple years or 3 years, maybe from now on, is a FY22 or something, and then our capital operating balance will drop to 300,000 or right. So so I just want to make sure that we're going to use a stabilization fund to cover that in case there's a need, right?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. Thank you. So if you remember the chart that Dave did for us, it shows that as we begin to repay the bond, which is really in year 3 of the plan, during the first year, because we're doing a level principal payment, the highest years of repayment are in the first few years of the plan, and then our payments drop over time. During those first few years of the plan, when the payment is highest, the difference between what we're repaying in debt and what we'll have available would leave about $300,000. If you remember, as we talked on Budget Saturday, we right now are operating in the positive over the course of the year, and what we're anticipating coming to you toward the end of the year is to ask you to transfer probably somewhere around $1 million to start the stabilization fund from our current budget. That will be one of the funding mechanisms to get this started. In the plan that we've laid out over time, in those leanest years of repayment, when we would only have 300,000, or I think it's 300,000, then it jumps right to 600,000 the next 2 years. What we're proposing is to supplement that with about $500,000 in capital, and then 300,000, 200,000 in capital in those lean years to really level fund what we have available for projects at around $800,000 a year.
Seeing no other hands up, I will welcome public participation. Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion to adjourn the budget hearing?
Second.
Okay. We now return to our regular business meeting. Now we do, yeah. But before we do, public participation again, so I will extend the invitation for anyone here who has a comment for us not related to an item on the agenda. Please step forward now. Okay, so we will move right to item 7. In your packet, you will find the recommended motion for item 7.1. And that is to approve the FY20 final Acton-Boxborough Regional School District budget and assessment. So do I hear a motion?
So I'll read this one then.
It's just number one, Paul.
Yeah, number one. So I move to, that the total appropriation for the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District for the fiscal year of July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2020 be set at $90,982,111, and that the member towns be assessed in accordance with the Education Reform Law in the terms of the regional agreement, and amendments thereto as follows. Acton, $61,235,254, consisting of a capital assessment of $2,726,396 and an operating assessment of $58,508,858, and Boxborough, $11,522,285, consisting of a capital assessment of $384,822, with the remainder to be accounted for by the following sources of funds. Anticipated Chapter 70 aid in the amount of $15,187,441. Anticipated Chapter 71, Section 16C transportation aid of $1,907,131. Anticipated charter school aid in the amount of $30,000. Anticipated federal Medicaid reimbursement of $200,000. Anticipated investment earnings of $200,000. Estimated miscellaneous revenues of $10,000, and a transfer from E&D reserves in the amount of $690,000.
Yes. Paul, would you amend your motion to include that the Boxborough assessment includes an operating assessment of $11,137,463? I think you
I'm sorry, did I
missed
skip that line? Oh, yes. Should I just read it over, or just accept the amendment?
Accept the amendment.
Yes, it's a friendly amendment.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. Item 7.2, we are voting now on the appropriation for the capital improvement plan and related debt, specifically a bond for $7.5 million for the purpose of capital improvements. Adam?
I'll make that motion. I'd like to move that the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District hereby appropriates the amount of $7,500,000 for the purpose of paying construction, installation, and all other associated costs of providing the capital improvements identified hereof in the district's capital improvement plan, CIP. And to meet this appropriation, the district treasurer is hereby authorized to borrow up to $7,500,000 under and pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 71, Chapter 16, subsection D, and the Regional School District Agreement, and or any other enabling authority, and that subsequent to an affirmative vote within 7 days thereof, the district, through its secretary, shall notify the Board of Selectmen of each of the member towns as to the amount and purpose of the debt so authorized.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, component 3 of our capital improvement plan.
So I'll move that the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District hereby establish a regional stabilization fund in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 71, Chapter 16G-1/2, half, okay, 16G and a half, for the purpose of providing funding for its future capital needs in conjunction with the district's capital improvement plan, CIP, and subsequent to an affirmative vote within 7 days thereof, the district, through its secretary, shall notify the Board of Selectmen of each of the member towns as to the funds so authorized.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. And I just want to say, we have just launched the very first long-term capital improvement plan for the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District, so we should feel really good about that. I'm going to move right on to item 8, presentations of school improvement plans. We have David Crane from McCarthy Town with us tonight, and Dana Lab from Blanchard.
Just as David and Matt are coming to the podium, I just want to say what a pleasure it's been to work with both David and Matt this year. You know, really, and getting to see McCarthy Town, I'm sure David will talk a little bit about this, but I had an opportunity to go to a parent night at his school last night, where they actually provided a series of workshops for parents to attend, and there was a rotation that was set up. And I thought it was about 150 parents that attended. It ended up probably be between 200 and 250 parents. But they got to go and actually learn from the teachers what took place during the Readers and Writers workshop. They learned from the teachers what took place during the arts integration, and they learned from the teachers what took place and what responsive classroom was all about and what that approach was. And then they actually engaged in the various activities that their kids would engage in school, and I just thought it was a tremendous way of really helping parents to understand the life of students. I think especially one of the comments we've heard from families over time as the homework policy has changed is homework was one of the windows into what happened during the classroom, and as there was less homework, that window disappeared a little for some of our families. I think this was a great way of thinking creatively about how to bring that window back, and not only, you know, are parents able to see through the window, they're actually able to walk through the door. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you, Peter. I guess we don't have to present very much more. Well, anyway, thank you for the opportunity to talk about our school. There's a piece that we've added at the end. We're trying to reach out to families as much as we possibly can. And to that end, we've engaged a professional movie-making firm to make a movie about our school and all that's important to us as a school community. Teachers contributed to what was important, and the filmmakers listened to us and then began to construct a film around those kinds of pieces. But first, I want to get to the goals and stuff like that. All right, what do I do here? Arrow? Okay. So as Peter's pointed out in the past, it's hard to find a good quote, but we tried to find one that was going to be relevant to the stuff that we do at McCarthy Town. There's nothing permanent except change. We find ourselves engaging in change all the time, just as we expect kids to when they change their adjustment or adjust their thinking about different new learning. We want us to do that to the admin team and the teachers, to think about what's important to us as a school and how to bring what's most important to kids as learners. So to that end, we're talking about the district core values and the alignment and connections to the district, which are going to run through all of the goals that we're going to be sharing with you. Wellness, equity, and engagement. So I'm going to run through the goals very quickly, and then we'll get into each one in a little bit more detail. The first goal is to continue to develop and support the workshop model in all of the classrooms. The second goal is to enhance the social vocabulary and interactions. I should be looking at this other stuff. Oh, it's right over there. For all children by continuing to use responsive classroom for the school community and by continuing to implement ideas and methodology from the social thinking curriculum. Third goal is to continue to explore and implement methods of integrating visual art into the curriculum at McCarthy Town, deepening curriculum understanding and enhancing the social emotional well-being of students. The fourth goal goes to the heart of what Peter was talking about that happened last night at our school, which is to educate and inform the McCarthy Town families as well as all of the recently hired faculty members of the three cornerstones of classroom activities at our school: responsive classroom, art integration, and the workshop model that support the mission and the vision of both McT and the ABRSD. The workshop model, the growth and refinement. This year, we are changing the way that we take a look at how we are going to supplement some of the work that we've done with Teachers College over the years by hiring a different consultant who used to be a staff developer for TC, but who is now working on her own. And she is working with our staff specifically on work around guided reading and small group work within the classroom. Across the grade levels, this is something that she is coaching into in the classroom, as well as holding various strategy sessions when there are no kids available to work with. We're finding that guided reading was a place that we weren't paying enough attention to as a school, and we're finding that already we're beginning to see some strong results from focusing on that and bringing up kids' abilities to articulate what they're thinking and what they're seeing and how they're putting this into play. Let me go back just a second. The Summer Institutes in Reading and Writing at Teachers College are continuing. Last summer we sent 8 teachers. Right now we're waiting for the coursework to open up so that we can apply, but we have 8 teachers again, different teachers, who are interested in attending these workshops. We added new staff last year, as you all know, from the bubble that went through our school, and the new staff is very interested in becoming more and more a part of what we do with our literacy work, and so they're interested in attending as well. We're also engaging in a year-long whole school Thursday afternoon professional learning book study on Joe Bowler's mathematical mindsets. This was authored by one of our teachers in conjunction with Heather Haynes, one of the curriculum department's curriculum leaders, and it's been a really big success. We've even had the art teacher, the music teacher involved, and so they're having a greater understanding of what are the things that can drive successful mathematics instruction, and we're finding that, of course, it's always good teaching practice that is involved when we do this stuff across the content areas. We've also made significant adjustments to our master and classroom level schedules to accommodate academic supports for all the learners in the school. This means that every single section of each grade level will be running the same schedule, which is going to enable us to sort of figure out, and we're trying some experiments this year, on how to bring special educators into the classroom rather than pulling kids out and forcing them to miss maybe components of the classroom we wouldn't want to have them miss, and also components of the classroom they don't want to miss. We adjusted what we called an intervention block to accommodate this, but now there are more, because the schedule is happening the way it is, there are kids who are finding themselves working side by side with more typically developing students and classmates as teachers are part of the process. Responsive classroom, and we have sent most of our new teachers that we hired to week-long trainings at RC. We've tried to do some more integration of social thinking language. Our counselor has been teaching classes. You'll see some of that on the film. She's gone to kindergarten and third grade and 5th grade this year, as well as kindergarten, to work with incorporating the language of the social thinking and actually drawing connections between responsive classroom work and social thinking. Do you want to add to that?
I think certainly, as Peter alluded to, with the budgetary considerations for social emotional learning, this is a core component. Obviously, at the elementary, we see the two as integral, the social emotional learning and the academic success. So the responsive classroom really provides a nice frame for the whole entire day. It sets up a very predictable pace from the morning meeting, but also travels throughout the day. And particularly with the addition of a social thinking language, it's really gotten teachers to have a very intentional use of language and how we communicate to students, communicate respect and the cooperation, and obviously circling back to our values around community.
Thanks. These are a little filler slide. These are some examples of some of the art that goes on for grade 1 and how it's connected to the curriculum. The national symbols curriculum that they're doing in 1st grade, you can see the Statue of Liberty and the flag renditions. One of our teachers, I wish we could have brought this, because has incorporated a stop time animation film of all the different portraits of the Statue of Liberty person, and it's amazing how they change, but they still end up almost looking the same. And on the other side is a work of Ghanaian animals that happens in grade 2. So art integration, this is the other piece of our four value, the third one in our 4 goals. Fundamental to the beliefs of the McCarthy Town is the concept of process. Our commitment to the artistic process encourages independent and self-motivated learning, where kids can explore, take risks, discover, honor differences, and develop skills for lifelong learning. A lot of this was on display last night when the families were able to experience what goes on in art integration. They were given artifacts in curriculum to do observational drawings on, the same way that the kids would, many from different angles and perspectives, and so they were able to then, as tables, compare their work. We have an entire hallway filled with parent work now, next to kid work, and it's awesome to see the differences, if you can tell.
And I think as Peter saw last night, what was great about that is parents were able to immerse themselves in the same risk-taking and struggle that we ask of our students every day that promotes growth.
Yeah, there was a good example of that was when one of our first grade teachers, who uses language really well with kids, sat down, because the teachers modeled this almost precisely the way they would do it with children. And so the adults were standing there, and so the teacher was asking. So today we're going to talk about characters and how characters can become our friends, and what we notice that's different about our characters, and how we notice that different friends have different characteristics, and that's what the root of the word is. Can anybody share anything that they'd like to share with us after you've noticed what we've read in this book? Not one parent, there were 45 of them, would step forward and say anything. And they were equally reticent to sort of take the same kind of risks with the art that they were doing too. And so over time, they began to get a sense of what their kids are participating in and what their kids are sort of up against. If there is some kind of a small degree of social anxiety that a child has to overcome within a certain setting, there's an opportunity and encouragement for them to overcome this and become part of the classroom that way. So the last goal is the Parent Education Forum, and as we've been talking about tonight, it was really such a hit. It was so great. I mean, we had, as we said, we were trying to figure it out between 200 and 250 parents, but it seemed like we had at least 1 million kids in the CAF, because one of the ways that we figured we could get families to come was to offer childcare. We got some of our alumni from the high school to volunteer to take care of the children. Peter Knowles, our PE teacher, and some other kids, older kids, took care of children in the gymnasium, offering various activities and games. And we had one of those Minion movies being played in the CAF. We also went through 30 boxes of pizza, which is something that blew my mind because I didn't think we were going to be able to eat it all. But it really did give families a sense of what happens at the school. And it really did give families an authentic sense of what their children go through each of these 4 pieces, of each of the 3 pieces that we are focusing on at McCarthy Town. And I also want to emphasize at this point that everything that happens in workshop goes across content lines. It's not simply literacy, it's also mathematics, it's social studies, and it's science. All right, now, thanks. If you want to ask questions now, I'm happy to entertain them, or we could watch the movie first. Which would you like? Okay, let me see if I can do this then. Do I just push the center button?
Yep, you got it.
Okay,
All
all right,
You just have to pop it out.
you do that.
Vic. You're good. You're good.
Good morning. Morning, Bridget.
We're going to use friendly voices, and we're going to look at our friends when we greet them. Thumbs up if you're ready to start.
So today, the power that we're going to boost is our partner power. You have an option to seesaw read, you can share your wow pages, take your hands, clasp them. Okay, our partner power is activated. Hands in your lap. Mom is hugging. Sit up.
we're making a text-to-text connection. So we're comparing one book to another book. So you just made a really nice text-to-text connection right there.
How do you change from bug crazy mad to caterpillar calm? We're gonna do lion breathing. Ready? Good job.
And as you do the monsters, I want you to think about what your monster's special power is and what you'd like to tell us when we write the book about our monsters, okay?
How many more do I need to get them done? Fantastic. Can I move the yellow? I can't. 1, 2, 3. How many did you count? 7. So you have 7.
Okay. And Julia, you start thinking about what you want to use as an estimate.
I decided to use 40 because it's a compatible number for me.
Okay, nice job using compatible numbers to solve that. I think you're right.
So you can either get a darker color or a lighter color.
Or I can mix them together.
Or you can even mix them together. That's a really great idea.
And I know that you're going to be eager to do it, but try to slow down a little bit when you're beginning to carve, okay? All right, let's get started, and we'll walk around and help each other.
What we do every day at McCarthy Town is complex, but we believe it to be simple. Our job as educators is to feed curiosity, encourage exploration, support intellectual risk-taking, all of this in the service of empowering kids to take charge of their own learning. Isn't that awesome? So I want to point out that we have a much longer version, but I didn't bring it, so we can share that maybe at another time. So I'd love to take questions.
Are there any questions for David? I just wanted to say I was really struck by the social thinking, the introduction of the social thinking stuff. My understanding of that is that, so responsive classroom is more like pro-social stuff, self-regulation, that kind of thing, and while social thinking is more perspective taking, which could play into the art as well.
Yeah.
So was that deliberate or?
I think it's coincidence, but I think that one of the things that we want to try to do is integrate everything that we do across the academic day into what is academic and what is social, including music, art, and PE. Everything, if we can make connections and point out threads that are common to everything to kids, they're likely to grab onto it easier and quicker.
Paul?
So Deb shared with me a book about studio learning, and I found that there were some similarities. Is that what you would consider this curriculum or delivery to be, kind of studio thinking?
I don't know. I haven't read that book, so I can't comment on it. What you saw with the kids working with the linoleum blocks was in the art room. So that's part of the visual arts curriculum. So there are things that kids are doing, but that even is connected. They're doing some skill building during the visual arts curriculum that they can then transfer to the work that they're doing in the classroom as they do observational drawings, as they think about what the other opportunities for art present. A lot of what we do with art is designed to get kids to take chances with what they do, with what they know. And it's amazing. Every year when we have tours that go through, families ask, my child is not good at art, or my child feels reluctant to do art. And that's not the point. The point is not the art necessarily. The point is the risk-taking that kids are going to be doing, the noticing that's what's going on at a neighbor's table, the conversation that happens around that, and the idea that you can create something and fix it if you don't like what you see at the beginning, instead of trying to change it all from the very start.
Eileen?
Hi, Dave. I'm just curious about your workshop model. Can we go to that page?
Yeah, if I can. All right, let's see.
Yes. So there are 4 different things here. I'm just wondering, could you explain, you have this workshop, and my question is, the workshop is for the teachers or for kids?
So workshop is a term that means that kids are working together to do things, that they're sharing knowledge and ideas and action in the process of learning. So a workshop, a typical workshop model would look like a teacher would present a strategy lesson or an idea for the kids to learn.
Okay.
They would go and try it out, and the teacher would work with the students either by conferring with them individually or in small groups, and then they would gather back on the rug and share what they've learned or what their questions that have been raised, and there would be then conversation about that. Teachers would then take notes on what kids are saying and use those as places of entry later on in the process at another time.
So it's like your everyday tools in your classroom.
Yes.
So what about the third one, like year-long, whole school, Thursday, professional learning book study? That's not for, that's the for professional learning, right?
we teach math. Some classrooms teach mathematics in a workshop model. So with Joe Bowler's work on understanding how kids learn mathematically, we're using that as a way to sort of improve the quality of the mathematics workshop. So that's what that's the point of that piece.
So I need your clear, how do I say that? Clear about, so that is the teacher use that, or the teachers?
Right, exactly.
Or the kids use that?
So all of the teachers in our school are participating in that year-long whole school Thursday professional workshop, professional learning workshop on mathematical mindset. The kids are the ones who are working on everything else that we do. Is that?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So workshop model itself is a daily instructional model, and that's in the classroom level. What we have listed here are basically the professional learning, as we're talking about. This is a growth and refinement. So this is what we're doing, working with the educators to work on the service delivery, to bring it back down to the instructional level that's going on every single day, and as David said, across the content. So workshop is not just in reading, not just in writing, not just in math, but hopefully it's happening in all curriculum areas every day.
Okay, so it's like mixed student and teachers task together for this whole page.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna, can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
And then we're gonna move on. For students who, you said you're moving to smaller groups in workshop, and so I'm wondering if for students struggling in like readers workshop with decoding, is that happening still in a pullout, or does that happen now in the
So
classroom?
when small group work is not smaller groups. I mean, small group work is happening in workshop all the time. It depends on what the teacher's goal is. So kids may be working in small groups, they may be working in partnerships, they may be working in book clubs, so which are different because it's all they're all instructional tools that we can use in the classroom. If a child is struggling with decoding in the early grades, then a guided reading group within the workshop would be used. So the teacher would set up the strategy lesson, teach it, send the kids off to do their independent work, but also gather a small group of kids to work with the teacher on specific things around decoding. Thank you.
Tracker, thank you so much. Yeah, it was really, really wonderful. Okay, our second school improvement plan presentation will be by Dana Lab from Blanchard.
All right, so as Dana's walking up, I also just highlight, I was over at Blanchard today for a couple of hours walking around with Dana. And I'll just tell you, one of the most exciting things I saw today, and I'm still excited about it, we were able to go into a 6th grade social studies classroom in which students were participating in a Socratic seminar in which the teacher introduced a topic, but then actually got out of the way, and it was really a student-driven discussion, and the students were just independently processing all of the different projects that they had done during the year in social studies, and the level of dialogue and the ownership on the part of the kids of the work they had done was stunning. And there were a couple moments in there where students asked each other's questions that were just so telling of the culture at that school and the trust that students had in each other. And I was just really blown away with that. And so I just wanted to make that positive comment before Blanchard takes over here. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And before we start, I just want to go back to David's presentation for a moment, David and Matt. A couple weeks ago, David invited me over to observe one of his classrooms, someone that was actually in that film. And one of the best parts about being in this district as a principal is to be able to have colleagues that will open up their building and let you come in and learn new things. So I just want to thank you for that, and it's great to see it there too, so thank you. Well, good evening. I think I just saw you guys not too long ago. I'd like to introduce members of our school council, all of whom are here tonight with the exception of our community representative, John Fallon, who's probably triple booked. So our parent representatives are Megan Connor from Boxborough, who will be speaking tonight, Claudine Hurlbuck-Lesk right there, and Alyssa Weiss, who's not here tonight. Our staff representatives are Karen Crockett, who will be speaking tonight, Lauren Grady, and Margaret Ingham. And just thank you for coming tonight. Okay, so I want to give our ad hoc member props too. So this is our assistant principal, Lee Whiting-Jones, and I want to thank her and Peggy Harvey for the picto chart that you're going to view tonight. It's some new technology that was shared by Peggy Harvey, and we thought we'd try it out. And Kelly Sterniello, who's one of our kindergarten assistants who helped us with the video that you'll see at the end. All right, ready? Okay. In the article, Good Seeds Grow in Strong Cultures, John Safier and Matt King share the following. School improvement emerges from the strengthening of teacher skills, the systematic renovation of curriculum, the improvements of the organization, and the involvement of parents and citizens in responsible school community partnerships. Underlying all four of these strands is school culture. The culture of a school is the foundation of school improvement. So for the next hour or so, I'm just kidding, a couple minutes, I'm just going to bring you up to date on some of the things that we've achieved and some of the things that we still need to work on. We feel like we have strong goals that speak to the mission and align with district values. We've had time to reflect on our progress so far this year, and we think about how we want to move forward with our future goals. Many teachers' professional practice and student learning goals also are reflected and connected to the school improvement plan. So the goals. The mission of Acton Boxborough Schools is to develop engaged, well-balanced learners through collaborative, caring relationships. We felt strongly about framing this work by making our goal areas representative of key stakeholders, which are students, staff, and families, and identifying opportunities to build relationships between all members of our learning community. The three categories of our goals are social emotional learning, curriculum, and culture and climate. We're going to share with you some of the strategies that relate to the progress towards each of these goals.
Our goal for students is to help them develop as inquisitive, flexible, resilient learners. We feel that developing a caring community sets the stage for all other types of learning. With our STAR values, we're working to build a common language about what they look like and sound like in practice through interactive modeling, posters of expectations in shared spaces, and a STAR template for classroom rules. To encourage problem solving, we are giving students opportunities to engage in learning experiences rooted in real-world contexts. For example, fourth grade mathematicians collected, represented, and analyzed data about how far kindergartners could jump down the hall compared to fifth graders, and how long staff members could hold a plank. I was number 2. He was number 1. We're also in our second year of implementing school-wide PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, aligning this framework with our responsive classroom practices. In addition to posters in common areas, students have co-created and presented videos at our community meetings about behavior expectations for places like the hallway, the bus, and the cafeteria. Our next step in this work is to administer a school connectedness survey to students to measure the impact of our efforts.
Hi everyone, I'm happy to be here as part of the Blanchard staff. I'm thrilled to say that 3 of your children cross my path every day. And as a staff, I am very proud to say that beyond our professionalism and being collegial, our staff truly loves and cares for all children that come through our doors. So this year, our professional learning aims to model what we do for students. We solicit feedback and then provide options based on needs and interest. Blanchard staff are engaging in responsive classroom book groups this year, focused on teacher language and joyful learning structures. All of the building-based professional learning is designed and led by our staff members. We have expanded our outdoor teaching this year with our Outdoor Professional Learning Day in November on a gray, foggy day, much like today, and 2 formal outdoor days with students. We also notice teachers holding morning meetings outside, taking classes to the woods for journaling and other activities, and using the outdoor classroom to teach math lessons. Many teachers now design their lessons with an outdoor component in mind. We continue to use multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS, to give students the academic support they need. And while student support looks different at each grade level, all teams are working to gather holistic assessment data and devote each time each week to provide interventions and extensions. Our goal is to build upon our existing framework to provide social-emotional strategy groups as well.
Blanchard is a growing, diverse community with over 500 students. The communications between home and school has been a big priority over the past few years. The school offers several ways to communicate with families. The monthly paw print shares information on the entire school. The Bulldog Barks enables the specials in various grades to communicate what is happening each month. We also had an information session at Open House to explain the math program pilot, and over 75 families attended. Teachers and staff also use social media, and they offer digital portfolios as a way to share special insights into the daily classroom experience. With the constant communication among our families, parents have a good understanding of the mission and values of the school. We have a very diverse PTF and are constantly thinking of new ways to engage our families, such as a family book group. This fall, we offered a new student orientation where we connected new students in the same grade with current students and had a scavenger hunt together. It was a great way for new students to have a familiar face at the start of this school year. We've had several special events so far. We held a fall fest on the campus on a beautiful Saturday afternoon where over 80% of our families attended. We held games, pumpkin carving, a bonfire, and families enjoyed live music and wood-fired pizza. We also had a very successful PTF auction, seasonal concerts from our choral and our band program, a bingo night, and an all-dance in April. And to help our kids take advantage of the beautiful conservation land that Blanchard has all on all the grounds, we have after-school art and nature programming for all ages. Blanchard has also collaborated with the Boxborough Recreation Commission in establishing programming before and after school, which includes a morning running club, an after-arts class, and a taekwondo program.
So we're going to take a look at some of the highlights. I was asked to address outdoor learning. I could be here all night talking about that, but I won't do that to you. Our campus naturally lends itself to outdoor learning, which has gained a lot of momentum this year as a result of our staff PL, our outdoor learning days, and the after-school nature programs. Our students are building a strong sense of connection to the natural world, building their sense of wonder and questioning. Students are passionate about environmental stewardship, as evidenced by our composting and recycling program, which is now completely managed by students. And when you see them do it, I saw them in the hallways this afternoon, their pride is visible every day, and couldn't be prouder of them for taking that on.
Our building took Peter's opening day speech to heart. He challenged us and tasked us with getting to know our students in order to make them feel loved, challenged, valued, and supported. We are mindful of how our community and culture shapes all learning in our school, and So this year we've worked on building and sustaining our vibrant culture through monthly community meetings organized by elements of culture. Culturally responsive activities and readings with staff. One example of that would be What's in a Name activity that we did during our November PL. Events like the Family Culture Fair, coordinating with ELA and social studies departments to develop and build our culturally responsive libraries, and responding to feedback from students. And one example of that is I was sharing lunch with students not too long ago, and many of them shared that they regularly use chopsticks at home. And so I talked to the food services department, and they agreed that they would be able to do something like that. And it's been great to see kids share that with that experience with their friends.
So a major focus of our teaching and learning this year has been our math program pilot. So we're piloting 2 programs in grades K through 5, Bridges and Investigations, and 1 at grade 6, Illustrative. All students also have access to Dreambox, which is an adaptive, personalized digital learning platform. Our math committee meets monthly to monitor the progress of the pilot. Our staff has conducted several observations in other schools who have implemented some of the programs, and we've also been gathering feedback from staff, students, and families in order to make an informed decision about where to go next with our math instruction. This is also an exciting time for technology integration. From scanning stories with QR codes to programming Sphero robots to peer editing with Google Docs, our students are building the foundational skills to be media literate citizens of the world. We're grateful to have access to 1-to-1 Chromebooks in grades 3 through 6 and 2-to-1 iPads in grades K through 2. And we intentionally balance digital learning with traditional platforms, play, and outdoor time.
So you spend a lot of time in this library making decisions, and we were trying to think of ways to show you how that plays out in the classroom, and it was evidenced in McCarthy Town's beautiful presentation. We wanted to give you the same. We thought about a timeline. We thought about doing it on a chart, and again, with David and Matt's presentation, we thought the best way to show you was with pictures. So seeing as we're right around the first 100 days of school, we asked all the staff to go into their phones and their computers, and we charged them with trying to find a picture for every day so far this year. And so what's nice about all these photos is many of them tie into the school and district values, and so we'd like to share that with you now. We'll take questions after. questions?
I'd love to hear more about your composting program.
So it sort of has evolved. At Blanchard, we did not have recycling or composting in our cafeteria, and so I worked with Kate Crosby and just said, we have to do this. And so we use a company called Black Earth, and they provide composting. They're made out of cornstarch bags, and so several other schools in the district do it. But what happens in other schools is there are coaches and it sort of gets down to just a few groups of kids. Our school started out that way, that we had fifth graders that taught every grade level, kindergarten up through grade 6, on how to sort their trays. So we have a tip bucket for liquid, or if you will, or waste, and then we have a trash, recycle, and composting. Students were taught within the first month of school. They don't need coaching anymore. They go through it, do a beautiful job, take care of each other. If something inadvertently goes into one or the other, we have little hand holders that can dig things out. For a while, that was a big thrill to be able to use those. And one of the things that we felt as a school is we didn't want it to be just a team of kids. It's the same way the recycling in our classrooms have evolved. So our school takes it on as ownership. Every child knows that it's their responsibility to our planet and to our school and our community to help out with it. And Black Earth is pretty cool. If we haven't got to that point yet, they come and they pick it up. But you can buy dirt back, and they have a program that you buy it back for $5 and do it as a fundraiser and sell it for $10. So if people want their gardens, we haven't got quite that adventurous yet to start that out, but in Boxborough we have a fall festival, the agricultural fair, and we've thought that would be a pretty awesome opportunity to maybe somehow go that next step.
Yeah, I would just point out that I was at an event at the cafeteria last night, and my second grader was far more adept at separating his waste after our meal than any of the adults in the room.
Sure.
Come on, we got more than one. Come on. No?
I don't have any comment, actually. I just love this, Dana. So last year, you gave us this.
Oh, you remembered.
Thank you so much. I got that reason why some kids in my neighborhood like to across the whole Acton to go to Blanchard. Thank you.
Welcome.
Mary.
I just want to comment that I love for the outdoor work that it's all year long. Because we live in New England, we should absolutely
hardy. We can
celebrate
handle
that. Exactly. Get out there. So I think
Ticks in the
that's
summer,
fabulous.
snow in the winter.
Yeah.
I like that you made a teaching moment of the use of chopsticks, and I saw one of the pictures in January was the use of chopsticks
mantra.
on a chicken nugget.
And I guess I'll just end by saying how moved, really, I was from the sentence that you wrote about students on the top of one of your slides. We talk about developing engaged learners through collaborative, caring relationships, and just the way that was phrased, that the outcome of that is inquisitiveness, flexibility, and resilient children. It was quite moving. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, I feel like there should be a drum roll now. So we've been waiting for the superintendent's report of entry findings for some time now. I'm very pleased to be able to say that tonight's the night. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Peter Light.
All right, so I thought you were going to say the drum roll and the enthusiasm, because we're actually 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Unheard of. And, is there, clicker over there, Beth? Oh, perfect, never mind, Beth. All right, so, I'm very, very pleased to be able to talk to you tonight about the report of entry findings. My goal tonight is to give you a little bit of context to it, but in all honesty, I want to try something a little bit different. And you'll laugh, but I'm going to say I want to talk less and instead allow you more of an opportunity to be able to discuss and share your thoughts and feelings about the report. This was certainly the culmination of 6 months' worth of work for me. And so, again, I want to put it into context, but when I did this, I was hoping more to create a dialogue than to list, than to prescribe things that I think need to happen within our community, because I actually think that playing on the strengths of our community, it's really about having that dialogue and continuing to evolve and improve our schools in ways that benefit our students. Before I get going too far, I want to make sure I thank a number of people. I want to thank Marie Altieri, because she was absolutely instrumental through the process of me coming into the district, not only for her knowledge and history of everything that's happened in the district, but her wisdom and depth of thinking around the various strengths that the district has, the opportunities we have ahead of us, the challenges that we've had in the past. It's just been so great to have such a great relationship with Marie, to be able to think that through and have a thought partner to be able to process some of this work along the way. So I want to make sure I thank her. I also want to thank Deb and Dawn, because they are also truly instrumental in being able to push my thinking a lot. The work that they've done around equity and the work that they've done really in moving the teaching and learning of this district forward as we've tried to become more inclusive and push ourselves has been exceptional. And to be able to have them, really lead some of that work has been fantastic. And so thank you both. I also want to make sure I thank the principals and other central office administrators, because, while this is certainly about my professional lens, I rely very heavily on the work and thoughts and feelings of others along the way about the strengths and opportunities we have as a district. Beth and Karen were key in helping me go through this report. I think I edited it probably 72 times. I think it reads like that too, and of course when we published it, there's still a typo that we found today. We got the printed report in, and I said, yep, there it is. I'll point it out to you, because I actually chuckled to myself, and I had a good comeback. It's at the bottom of page 1 in your printed report, and it says, the future of our schools. I was not thinking of America the Beautiful when I wrote that, of the I Sing, but, I have to have a little humor at myself at times. But thank you to Beth and Karen for all the work you did in helping to get the final product out. School committee members, each of you actually played an integral role in this. As you remember, as I was coming in new last year, I had an opportunity to sit with you individually, hear your thoughts and feelings on some of our strengths and opportunities ahead. Hopefully you see those reflected back in some of the questions and themes that come out here. And then just really all of our students, teachers, and faculty and families who took time to meet with me throughout the course of the fall, have me into their classrooms. It was just such a wonderful way of connecting with people and hearing what's on the minds of the community. So again, hopefully that's reflected back. There are certainly things that were shared with me throughout the process that may not have risen to a level that it became a theme. And I want to make sure I recognize that even though someone may have shared some feedback that didn't rise to the level of a theme, it still was heard, and oftentimes that was shared back directly with various staff members or schools that needed to hear that feedback. So I just wanted to recognize that as well. Just to give you a little overview of the entry process, you've seen about half of this slide before, but I had essentially come to you in September and laid this process out where it was broken down into 3 phases. And the first phase was from when I started in July up until really the end of November-ish, and I put ish as an emphasis on all of this because it's a fluid process. And that was my opportunity to get out, listen, and learn as much as I could about the district through the collective lenses of the entire community. From December through January, that was an opportunity for me to pause that process a little bit and reflect back on the data that I had collected, what I had seen in classrooms, my experiences, my talks with various community members, students, faculty, look at some of the data around performance, look at some of our data around student populations, and try and move that all together. I then took that information and was able to draft a report of entry findings and share that with our leadership team. We did that over the course probably of about 4 hours that we spent processing this, and as an opportunity for me to share some of my initial thoughts with the team, hear their feedback on it, and continue to hone my own thinking about that. I've also had an opportunity to share that with some other key stakeholders within the community, just to test my thinking and make sure that I was on track. So I have shared it with a couple committee members quietly, just to get a sense of, am I on target, off target? Is there something that I'm saying that doesn't resonate or doesn't make sense or is factually inaccurate? Because it's really a vetting process to go through something like this. So I wanted to share with you that that happened. And that brings us to tonight, where we're at the report of entry findings. So this brings me to kind of the bottom part of the slide. So I've gotten stakeholder feedback through a variety of one-on-one and small group and larger group meetings. I've been able to get into schools and classrooms across the district on multiple occasions. I visit each school monthly for approximately 2 hours, walk and talk with the principal, get into classrooms, see what's happening, talk with kids. And then I've also had an opportunity to look at the data. My biggest area of interest is where those three elements intersect, kind of in the middle of that. And so the process of coming up with entry finding is thinking about where the data intersects with each other and putting that through the lens of my own professional judgment and experiences to develop this report that I'm presenting to you tonight. That's not the end of this process, because the report isn't a document that's intended to be produced just to look cute. I purposefully did this in the form of questions because I wanted to promote a community dialogue around what we want for the future of our schools, and to continue to have to think deeply with the leadership team and with you about our next steps and how we're going to continue to evolve our own strategy as a district and where we want to take ourselves for improving. That third phase that I'm talking about right now should happen from the end of this report up until next fall, when we come back with our district goals. And the district goals next fall will reflect an expansion of our current strategy in order to be able to think about where we're going over the next 3 to 5 years. So the way I organized this report, as I collected my data and looked at all of the information, it really evolved into 6 broad themes that emerged. I chose to frame them as questions because I wanted to promote curiosity on the part of anyone that read it. Wow. Read. It's that time of night. We had an early ALG meeting this morning. Anyone who read it, that dialogue. There are more discrete questions within each of those themes that arose, and I wanted to show kind of how those synthesized into the broader overarching essential questions for each section. Each of those was supported by a series of evidence that was pulled from stakeholder meetings, school and classroom observations, and data analysis. I purposefully chose not to name any individual stakeholders because I think that it needed to, sometimes stakeholders included groups of people, sometimes it could include one person, or it could include 2 people. And what I didn't want to do is feel as though any 1 or 2 people through the process felt that they kind of were left exposed in terms of the feedback they were giving me. But essentially, I used kind of that triangulation process to come up with the findings. I did share and test my conclusions. I talked to you a little bit about that. And then, again, this is really, hopefully you didn't hire me just to go out, interview a bunch of people and tell you what they said. It's really about me applying my own professional judgment about where I think we can go as a district next. So, with that said, I did not make the report very visual. But I picked and chose the pictures and charts that I included for very specific reasons. If you had an opportunity to look at the report, I chose to start with a group of kindergarten students entering school on the first day of school, and I chose to end the report with our high school students going into school. We are a pre-K through 12 district, and we have students for 13 years, and we have this charge to make those the 13 most impactful years of their lives. We are, at times, family members to kids. We're family members with parents. we just have this tremendous opportunity ahead of us to think deeply about how we want to make 13 years of students' lives something that they remember and carry with them for the rest of their own lives after that. The chart on the bottom I chose because I actually saw this when we were in a budget subcommittee meeting, and I think either Dave or Marie put it up at first, but it was our demographics over the last 20 years. And when I think about something that universally everyone found striking, this chart probably sums that up. We understand that we're a diverse community, but when we understand the demographic shift of this community over the last 20 years, it's truly staggering. It is one of our greatest strengths to be as diverse as we are. And hopefully a major theme that came through was our opportunity to leverage the diversity of our community to think about how we want to grow as a school district. So with that said, I'm going to introduce you to the 6 broad themes, and then what I'll do is I'll go through a theme, give you a little bit of background information, and then hopefully, if it's okay with you, Diane, just open the table up for discussion a little bit. So 6 themes, and again, these are formed as essential questions, but the first one is how can we manage tension that's arisen from an increasingly diverse cultural perspectives about education and the purpose of schools, and leverage this diversity into increased opportunities for our students. 2, how can we continue to expand our strategic plan in order to increase our focus on the teaching and learning process and more fully articulate our vision for student learning? 3, how can we manage tension between greater district-wide strategic coherence and the rich traditions of individualism and autonomy that have developed in the various schools? 4, how can we foster an increased culture of inclusivity and best leverage our resources in order to support an increasingly diverse student population with regard to learning profiles, race, and socioeconomic status in a more inclusive environment? 5, how can we be more proactive in meeting the needs of a fast-growing population of students with increasingly complex and acute social and emotional needs? And then my last one is how can our leadership teams most effectively employ the characteristics of high-performing teams to support the work of the schools in the district? So those were my 6 broad themes, and let me talk to you a little bit about the first one. Most importantly, I wanted to put this on a slide that you would not be able to read from any farther than about 2 feet away, which I can't read either on my screen, so it's a great leveler of the playing field, so to speak. So this one was really about the tension. 2 things. It's about the increasing diversity of our community and natural tensions that are going to arise when you have multiple cultures coming together within a community who have different cultural values and norms and beliefs around education. That's actually a really good thing, but it's naturally going to cause some tension that comes up. What I found through the entry process, and this is where I'm going to talk more to you about it than read from the report, but what I found through the entry process is as I interviewed stakeholders, there was this natural tension that emerged between this idea of wellness and, AB's long history of academic excellence and achievement, and this fear of how do we continue to promote wellness while also balancing that with our history of achievement. And what was interesting about it, and as I started to really dig deeper into beliefs, I didn't hear a single stakeholder through the entire process that didn't completely agree with our focus on wellness. Where it played out mostly was maybe in some differing beliefs about some of the specific initiatives we took to address it and how those unfolded. Homework was certainly one that we heard a lot about. Just in terms of some of the values that different people within our community had around what's the role of homework, what are the values that homework can instill in students, I think was a really interesting perspective for me to learn more about. And it was just one of those natural points that I think we have to think through, and as we implement programs, what stood out to me is this real need to think through how what we might intend to happen can be viewed through different cultural lenses and backgrounds, and be able to think proactively about how we need to outreach and listen to various stakeholders within the community to make sure that we're really hearing and valuing each of our students and families' perspectives on how something might play out. I think that's an opportunity we have ahead of us, and I'd love to see. So that really is the background information for the first 2. what was interesting is when I presented that to the leadership team, some of the history of how the vision and values were developed was an increasing, and this is back in 2015, 2016, there was an increasing awareness of the leadership team of kind of student stress and anxiety around school and mental health needs of students. And so the leadership team had purposefully partnered with Challenge Success, and I think some of the values that emerged were pushback on what the leadership team had perceived as a hyper-focus on test scores historically in the community, dating back decades and decades and decades. So I think what emerged, though, is in the stated vision and values for the district, some of the way it came across didn't really ring out, because I think what some people, and certainly stakeholders shared this with me throughout the process, what some people heard in the stated mission, vision, values, or actually didn't hear, was this continued commitment to excellence. And interestingly, when I talked to the leadership team about that, they were very clear that there was absolutely a continued commitment to excellence and achievement, but they saw the wellness as such a threat to our being able to do that, that they wanted to prioritize wellness in the improvement plan. And so there was this tension that I think that emerged out of how we implemented programs and then moved forward. So that was really the basis of those questions. How can we make sure that as we implement the programs and practices, we're continuing to think about that tension between the values that different people have within the community? And then also, how do we implement some strategies to make sure we're really listening to people and getting their perspectives as we're moving forward? The second, or the third bullet down, is really about taking a look at the open enrollment program, and it's not that open enrollment is bad. Open enrollment is one of the largest drivers of success and kind of engagement in this district, and it's what makes AB unique, or it's one of the things that makes AB unique. However, we're at a point where our schools are becoming, or several of our schools are becoming less diverse, and not in a way that reflects the overall demographics of the community. I think, for example, we have two schools where the Asian population is much higher than the rest of the community. We have two schools where the white population is much higher than the rest of the community. I think I don't have an answer to that, and that's not a quick answer, but I think what we need to think about in a school choice model is what's driving how people choose schools, and why are people choosing schools like that, and what are some of the strategies we might do to make sure that school choice is not predicted solely by race as we move forward. The next one down, as I came into the district, we had, and I've looked at programs, we've had an extraordinary commitment to this idea of social justice and equity across the district. And so that played out, I think, as I look at the junior high 8th grade curriculum and really looking at bias through the lens of history. I look at the funds that we've spent in elementary school classroom libraries to make sure that the literature students read is rich and diverse and representative of the students and the families in those classrooms. At the high school, they reviewed the entire English curriculum and looked to incorporate more books that represented diverse cultures. We have a lot of that, but interestingly, when I looked back at our core values, we have equity as a core value about providing access to programs. But what I saw as missing, and this is where it's more about my own professional opinion on something, what I don't see is something that really clearly states this value for human differences and kind of this, really underlying respect for human differences. What stood out to me as I saw it in the work of the schools in the district and in the community, I just didn't quite see it in writing. And so it was a wonder to me if that's something that we could be more explicit about. And then that led me to the next bullet, which is really, as I came in, there had been a number of hate incidents that happened in the community on our campuses. I also heard from students and some parents in passing that, some of our high school students and junior high school students will sometimes joke with each other about who's better at math, who's better at sports, who's better at this, who's better at that. And they're saying it jokingly, and it's very lighthearted. But underlying that is some real bias about cultures and belief systems. And so that led me to really think about how can we continue to prioritize anti-bias education for our students. The district has done amazing work in bringing that to our faculty through the Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity Program, and that's something we're going to be doing together later this year. But I want to keep thinking about how can we push ourselves in that direction. And then finally, I think this is more aspirational, the last one. We have an incredible opportunity to really think about global competence as an outcome for our students. It certainly is one of the primary 21st century, and I even think 22nd century skills. I think we're probably at the point now where we have to be thinking 22nd century skills. Our community is so well leveraged to be able to think about how can we use our own resources to increase the global perspective that our students have coming out of our schools. We see power centers around the world are shifting, and that's really at the heart of a lot of the turbulence in our society today. Is this power center of Western Europe and the United States is no longer the only power center in the world, and we're seeing emerging cultures and nations take over that to some extent. How can we leverage our kids now to be able to work and live in that environment into the future, I think is an opportunity. I also think it's an opportunity to think about how can we get our kids overseas, experiencing some of this firsthand. I think from an educator standpoint and an administrator standpoint, what wonderful experiences it would be to have our educators getting out and experiencing firsthand what some of these cultures look like, to be able to bring that knowledge back into the schools and have that as a foundation to be able to relate to our students and our families in the community. So that's really where I was coming from in thinking through this kind of first overarching theme, that it's not only managing the tension, but it's also leveraging that diversity into our opportunities ahead. So with that said, I don't know if this is a great time to pause or not, but I'll turn it over to you.
I don't even know where to begin. The question format provoked a lot of thought, I'm sure, with everyone. So I'm just going to throw it out to you. Just raise your hand if you want to respond. I'm not going to go in any order. I think maybe, I want to hear from everybody, but I won't necessarily do a really structured thing where we go around. Tessa?
Well, this first one resonated with me a lot, since the graph that has so oft been mentioned represents basically my lifetime as an adult since graduating from high school at AB. Things have changed dramatically, and I think that for me, exploring these sort of themes and the way my now rising high schooler is going to, has experienced it as part of elementary school, and, it all came full circle last night as I sat at 8th grade parent orientation, which was weird in lots of ways, but, looking around the crowd and reflecting on how different it was to sit there now 25 years later, for me, this is it's incredible to be sitting at the table and sort of tackling these questions, because, that it really, and listening to the things that my 8th grader talks about in terms of social studies and her experience and of just being, to have the experience of having a child that identifies friends, she's the one that wears all the cute clothes, and then finding out that actually that family is African American, and she never identified, them in a racial way or whatever. It's astounding to me as a parent, having grown up in a community that was really predominantly white, obviously from looking at that graph, to be in this community with all of the wealth of knowledge and culture that comes from all of the diverse cultures that are represented here now is just amazing. So I appreciate that, all of the questions that you asked, because I think it's an important thing to explore, and it's an exciting thing to explore how we can really leverage that moving forward.
Mary?
So I was part of the team who did visits to the other districts when we were interviewing candidates, and the people we met with repeatedly said how Peter listens and how he can have difficult conversations, and I think this whole plan highlights that. I think you've listened really well to the community. You have nailed the major issues that this community needs to address. but you've done it in a way that's really, it's open and it's optimistic and it's building. You talk about opportunities a lot. Even though there's tension, there's opportunities. I remember 3-4 years ago, somebody at school committee, a school committee member, raised the issue about the imbalance in some of the schools. And I had to say, I can't understand what you're saying, because they wouldn't say it in an open way to acknowledge what the problem was. I mean, I truly couldn't understand what that committee member was saying. And you've just laid it out there, and it's very open, because we can't address these issues if we can't talk about them. And it's not that one group is right and one group is wrong. Like, I love the whole concept of, why do families choose some schools over other schools? And if we could learn that, then we could make all the schools attractive, and maybe then their kids don't have to be on the bus as long. You know, there's a lot of different things we can think about, and so this gives us that opportunity to have these conversations. I think each of these is like, each of your major theme areas is at least a school committee meeting, if not a couple each, because they're really deep. And I think that the school committee can work with you to figure out what's going to, by August, be in the next kind of strategic plan. But I think some of it it's much longer work, and some of it might not get in the plan and be addressed later, but because there's so much there. But I just think it's fabulous.
So I'm going to jump in and remind everyone that I had proposed a March workshop. It would be an evening event on campus, and the goal would be to really flesh out the entry plan and really talk deeply about our thinking around that. So this is not the only opportunity you will have. This is just an initial reaction. Amy?
I agree with everything Mary said. You really nailed it, and you really presented it in a very positive light. I think one of the biggest struggles that I've seen since being on the committee is, and I see it in my own house, being married to someone who grew up very differently from me and has, different concerns about education and success and all and so forth. So my husband and I have had to work through a lot of this. I think the idea that there are so many misconceptions and stereotypes put on different groups, and there's this kind of there's an automatic kind of feeling, well, you must think of things a certain way because of where you come from. And there hasn't been a lot of conversation where groups can sit down and actually really share what are you thinking, what are you feeling, because sometimes when you say one thing, it doesn't so I'm going to use the word translate, but I'm using that it doesn't, what one person perceives about wellness and rigor, and when a conversation comes forward, sometimes it becomes a very divided conversation, that if you're talking about wellness, you must be talking about coddling, or if you're talking about rigor, you must be talking about, studying 900 hours a week and taking multiple tests and exams, and neither is true. So it's nice to have this finally start to open up so that we can actually have some honest conversations about this. Sorry.
I agree very much. I found this very thoughtful and thought-provoking. And I just have a short comment and then just a quick suggestion. So I think that in my conversations with community members, it seems like it's always an either-or thing, and there are going to be winners or losers. We're going to keep open enrollment, which is absolutely vital, and that's why our system's so great, or we have to get rid of it because it's leading to all these horrible things and it's costing us too much money. And I think that this really sets the table to start thinking about it in a non-binary way, which is really helpful. And then just as a comment, as somebody who's read a lot about this, something that's totally obvious is starting language in earlier grades, well before junior high, and opening up, the number of languages from what we were teaching in 1970 is one thing. And I know there's a lot of students who are bilingual, already and have great programs outside, but for the rest of the students, I had a hard time finding any opportunities for my kids to access language when their brain was more open to being able to develop it. So that's something I was never able to successfully do. So thanks.
First of all, I really like, you list all the open topics that we could discuss later on in the workshop that Diane just mentioned. I just have one quick comments or suggestions. Actually, that opportunities for students itself, it's a topic or a question you could list here, because what kind of opportunities we want to increase for our students. So yeah, that's the only comment I have. Thank you.
I think it's really telling that this is the first item on the list of questions, because I think that this can really help progress the rest of the questions in your report, Peter. What comes to mind for me is a word that I tend to use a lot with my customers, which is empathy. And that idea of being able to put yourself, not just understanding what someone else is feeling, but being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to really see it through their eyes. And I think that if we're to succeed in our current goals and the future goals that will be a result of this report, I think we've got to get the community behind us, and one of the best ways we're going to be able to do that is for every different group of diverse members of our community to have a little bit of empathy around the perspective, put themselves in the other community members' shoes, so that they can see, like Amy said, what does wellness mean from my eyes, or what does it mean to have an inclusive environment? So I think that this idea of managing that tension, but also, creating some empathy community-wide around the different cultural groups that we have, because that will really set the table for all the rest of the work that we're going to want to do.
To share with you a story. When I hope you don't mind, Eileen, when Eileen joined school committee, we would go for walks, and we just wanted to understand I wanted to understand who she was and why she thought about education the way she did. And I grew up in California, and we just could not be more opposite on most things. And I remember talking about homework, and then just coming away from it saying like, "Oh my God, I hate it," and she's like, "I just love it." And it was really just the relationship piece grew even as the differences of opinion were very obvious. So I just wanted to share that. Angie.
Yeah, like any other members, I really love the format of the question. You really, really raise a lot of good questions. That's really the root of a lot of the problem that we see in the community. And I actually want to recognize that you use the word tension. That's to me, that's acknowledge of the problem. So I really think that this is really provoking and put a platform for the future. So I'm really looking forward to the next step. I want to have one input because as I have really huge confidence in the AB education. I have one already out of the system, and I see the presentation and all the things that we're doing right now, and I really have huge confidence in the future student that we're going to produce here. And
because you also mentioned about the global awareness. And I want to add one thing, which is how we have great students and how we provide and create opportunity to let our students shine in this global competitiveness, especially right now. Right now is the college application time. So as you know, the college application right now is become a global competition. So how we help our students and create opportunity and chances for our good student to shine and on the platform, I think that's I want to add onto the next step. Thank you.
Diane, I just wanted to echo what Mary said at the beginning. It was, incredibly, I don't know how do I say, when I read Peter's funding and, so Mary said at the beginning, just, I can't remember that anymore, but it's really, really great. And I would like to echo what Angie said. I love that. And I don't want to repeat that anymore. It's so great. I have the same confidence for for our AB future, if we can, really step by steps, answer those questions. And also, I want to thank Diane. I remember who Adam mentioned about the culture difference and what is the culture lens. When you look at something, that's exactly Diane and we exchanged our ideas and how do we think about just one simple things. And I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but I really want to give you one simple question and we look at that. And I think our district to get rid of the skip test, math skip test, and that's, and I exchange that. But someone really think, this skip test block some student learning math because that tells us, like, I'm not good at math. But for some student, they're seeing as there is a flag, over there is a goal. I wanted to learn, reach the goal, but now there's no goal anymore. Okay, so just a different perspective. So that's just how do we think about that and thoroughly think about how do we make the policy, how do we make the decision. That's just very, it's an example. Okay, so thank you.
I also appreciated the thought that went into generating the questions around tension. When I read through, I got a clear sense, and Peter, you had alluded to this about, some items we might decide don't require further work, other items we want to put front and center. That's kind of the thinking that I was generating while I was reading it. So I got certain priorities of things that I think we should focus on. And I'm wondering if it would be helpful if we kind of got like a monkey survey monkey kind of thing on which questions committee members felt were the priorities and kind of come up with a consensus on priorities so that we can focus on the march on the things that we as a committee feel are the priorities.
That's great feedback. There's actually some really nice protocols that you can use at the beginning of that kind of a meeting to kind of flesh that out as a group, because sometimes it's about having opportunity to dialogue around why people thought certain things would be a priority. But absolutely, yeah, when I wrote this, I actually wrote it with the intention that between school committee and leadership team, we could get some synergy over the next 6 months and helping to develop that set of priorities. Because one thing I did also hear is feedback through the process. There were some school committee members who felt like maybe the previous strategic plan had been given to them later in the process after it was developed and wish they had had more input during the process. So that's something that, while it's produced great results, it was just something I thought about of how can we make sure that we have school committee as a leadership team, we have, principals and central office as a leadership team, and then we have all of our faculty and students. How can we get synergy with that in terms of developing some really clear priorities to come out of this with?
So I'd actually like to think also a step further. I think it's be really important to get this out to the community so that when we are proposing changes, they see where it comes from and that it's not a new idea and you're kind of building them as partners along the way. So I think, I don't know how many of these you had printed, but annual town meeting on the back table. I also think that at least the high school students should see this. So I'll say, and she won't ever watch the tape, so she won't know I'll embarrass her, but I was talking about this at home, and my daughter said, well, okay, I have a biased perspective now because you like it, so I like it. But right now, all the high school kids judge the superintendent on snow days, and he's not doing so great.
Yeah.
Because they want more. But I think, because I hear some of the students' voice in this. I know when you say stakeholders, that students are some of those stakeholders. And then Eileen's touching on perspective and empathy and Adam, and I think some of that perspective and empathy has to be from the students' perspectives. So I was just counting, and so I'm going to date myself. It's been 40 years since I started high school. 40 years. The world is so different. And so I can sit here and have ideas, but are they what the kids are really experiencing in the classroom? And the presentation from McCarthy Town really hits that, for the parents to see how the kids experience it today. So I think some of that viewpoint and empathy has to be from our students' perspectives. Maybe you and your husband struggle more than an Indian and a white student sitting next to each other in the same classroom. Maybe not, I don't know, but we do see. But one of the things that hurts me, as much as the segregation we see in the schools, you see it in the cafeteria. You see the Indian girls sitting together and the Chinese kids and the white kids. And I know my life is richer for the people that I have in my life who come from varied experiences, be it race, ethnicity, income, geography, all of that. And so it makes me sad that we have all this and we're not taking advantage of it. So trying to moving it out to the community as well.
So I'm glad you said that, Mary, and I wanted to piggyback on what Ginny said about languages, because I think that's the opportunity that we can utilize to help bridge that, and I think it would be a wonderful idea to bring languages earlier into the curriculum, and I'm especially encouraged to see that we have so many languages that are in our community that we're not taking advantage of, and I worry that some of the English language learners feel a little marginalized because of it. But I think that we can turn that totally around and empower them to be teachers of the language that they're familiar with. So I think we have opportunity here to help solve a lot of this tension.
Just one really quick thing building on what Mary said. Dana, one of the people during the Blanchard thing, noted that the PTF there has started a monthly book club, and they've specifically chosen books that raise some of these questions. So the book that we're reading this month is called Despite the Best Intentions, How Racial Inequality Thrives in Good Schools, which I'm guessing by looking at the cover, though I have not started reading it yet, has a lot to do with actually black and white, which is not necessarily what we're dealing with here, but I imagine it raises some of the questions. And then the other thing, just to note, as far as the languages go, I was thinking last night at the 8th grade orientation at the high school, how it's presented as world languages, but in a lot of the professional reading I do, ASL is included in a lot of high schools, and that's, I don't know if that has come up here. I know there was like a club that Mary talked about at one point, but world language is sort of leaves that out a little bit when you're thinking about international stuff, but just something to think about in terms of how we incorporate everyone. Yeah, right, that, Mary.
So I have 2 dates to float for the March workshop, and you can look.
There are actually 6 of these. There's 5 more of them. I can go through a little bit.
Yeah, so let me float the dates, and then I'll give the microphone back to you. Okay, so the first date is Thursday, March 14th. This is 7 p.m. And the second date, the second option is Monday, March 25th.
Sorry, what was the first one?
March 14th, it's a Thursday. 7 p.m. So you have,
Just depending on location, I would point out that on the 25th, Open Door Theater is here in their Tech Week, so there would be a lot of activity going on in the building at that time.
okay, if you wouldn't mind just sending me an email on your preferred date, that would be great. Okay. You want me to send out a Survey Monkey or a doodle poll or something? Okay. All right.
All right, so for 2 of 6. So the next one is really about how can we continue to think about the teaching and learning process being kind of the supreme goal of the district. And one of my first impressions of the district was when I was actually a candidate here, and I happened to look up the district's long-range strategic plan. And, I knew a little bit about AB, but in all honesty, not much, because I was kind of more on the South Shore. And I saw, wellness, equity, and engagement as the values, and then I looked at the district improvement plan, and I saw a really clear goal around social emotional well-being. I saw a really clear goal about equitable access to opportunities for students. And then I saw we're going to build buildings and fix things. And while it's incredibly important work and important work that supports everything else, my first impression was, I wondered about where's the teaching and learning in this. And as I came in and I got to work with Dawn, Deb, Marie, go through building principles, see what teachers are thinking about, there's an incredible value placed on teaching and learning in this district. And I wonder how we can take that value and make sure that it comes out in our plan. That was that first bullet, is how do we make sure that that stays supreme as what we're working on, and that we're here for teaching and learning. Along with this, I think that one piece of feedback that I heard, and it's actually a quote that stuck with me to the point where I remember it almost every day. Someone said, well, if we're not looking at SAT scores, and we're not going to look at MCAS, and we're not going to look at niche.com, and we're not going to look at Boston.com or U.S. News and World Report, we keep hearing that we're expanding this notion of success, but what are we going to look at? Like, how do we know that our kids are going to be successful if we don't have these traditional measures that we want to judge ourselves by? And there's a lot out there in education right now to think creatively and think broadly about what we want our students to achieve when they leave here. What are the types of skills we want students to leave with after 13 years? What are the types of competencies, beliefs that we want our graduates to hold as they leave us and head off into the big world that's out there? I actually think this is something that could help us also with that first goal of really defining what we want our kids to do and giving ourselves benchmarks to be able to look at that over time and really think about how we can measure our progress against the goals that we set. So that was really the genesis of that second bullet. And then in the third one, having been in a lot of classrooms across the district and heard from a lot of stakeholders, and as I came in, I have actually read hundreds of classroom observations and teacher evaluations across all the schools to just get a sense of who's who and what the strengths are. I think there's also some really, really creative teaching and learning happening in our district. And I think that in this idea of kind of the individualism and autonomy that came up through Acton and Boxborough, there are some really creative practices, but they don't always have the opportunity to get shared. And the way that we talk about teaching and learning has been very siloed by building at times. And so as I talked with principals about the evaluation process and what that looks like, I think there are opportunities to become more consistent in how we look at educator evaluation. I think there's opportunities to think about what are the really high-yield educational goals that we have, and how can we ensure some strategic coherence around those goals through both the educator evaluation process and the professional learning that we have educators engage in. And there's that rich tension. You're going to actually see it come up in a subsequent one about how do we balance that tension between strategic coherence as a district and the goals we have, and maintaining that sense of individualism and autonomy that's also driven a lot of the high-level work we have as a district. In all honesty, this is one where I would love, and I talked to Deb a lot about this over the last few weeks as I've been preparing this entry report. This is one I would love for us to swing for the fences when we think about where do we want our students to be 50 years from now, and what are the types of competencies we want them to have, what are the belief systems that are at play in our schools that are going to drive teaching and learning, and really lay out a clear vision for where we're going to head with our teaching and learning over the next handful of years. There is such potential and such deep skill and care in our teachers in this district and our administrators who support them. I just think that if we can get that cohesion to move forward with a clear vision for where our graduates are going to be, it's going to help us gain a lot of traction and just accelerate that process of improvement.
I'm really glad to hear you say this. I think that we have a lot of amazing things happening at the younger grades and at the junior high, especially. I mean, I've seen some amazing things at the junior high, but just as each elementary school might be siloed in their own educational practices, I see at the high school it's also each department is very. They're very contained. They're very siloed in their own departments, and I think that that's a place where there's a lot of potential to make some big moves. So I'm happy to see that we're looking at this. I just want to make sure that we're not, we don't just continue to look at the younger grades, that we really also take a hard look at the high school, because I think there's a lot of things that are happening that could be happening there.
So I'm very interested to hear you talk about where the kids are going to be, 50 years from now, or when they're 50, because I want to keep in perspective that, given the average lifespan of 80 years, we're really have an impact on the first 20% of that span, and I really do think that graduation, the end point is not graduation, it's not a final exam, it's not the SAT, it's what's beyond. And I think that for us to be thinking about that beyond, I think we're starting to have the conversation that positions our kids well for being successful when they're 50.
And that makes me think about the wealth of our community. Like, part of, as we look at that, swinging for the fences, so I can sit here and write. Do you guys remember Dr. Zhao came and he said for him the success was your kid not living in your basement after college, right? I'm like, that is success. Yeah. And I think about, like, study habits are critical. But if I think about swinging for the fences, I really need to open my mind. And we have so many amazing, college-level educators in our community, and business people, and different nonprofits and for-profits and all of this. And I'd love to hear from them. What are they looking for in students and employees, and what will they be looking for? Because that could help us really think really broadly.
I'm just going to add to that. There's so much curriculum to deliver, and I wonder what are the impediments, like from a teacher's perspective, when they go to build instruction, to what extent they feel free to use the curriculum, like in innovations or whatever, as springboards to drive instruction versus just feeling pressed to deliver the curriculum right out of the book.
I want to push back a little bit on what I heard Mary say, because, although I am interested to hear business leaders and about what they expect from good employees, I think that's not swinging for the fence, because I think what we need is to position our students for when they mature, they're job creators. They're not going out they're not going to be applying for a good job. They're going to be sending the job positions, openings. That's my vision.
Well, I love to, it's not like a debate, but I love to echo what Mary says. And again, Paul, I think we discussed that, when one summer evening time we talk about that. And, create the job opportunity, also the job. It's one type of job, right? So, someone meant to create a job opportunity for other, but that's his job, right? It's one kind of job, just different. And also, I think if the college are not looking for SAT score or anything, and we're not going to prepare it, but that's something we cannot avoid. For now, at least, I don't know if it's in 50 years, and we're not doing that, and hopefully, yes, hopefully we are not going to doing that. But, however, I have to say, our education itself, it's not just the score, but the score is part of something in our plate. And other than that, I think our AB is so very wonderful. And Mary and I, we talk about, I don't know if how many of you are in our show, Cabaret, how wonderful that is. Many community members told me, $12, what's this? It's a steal. They want to pay $20, $30 for that whole night. Some of them are in that show for 2 nights. And our drama team, it's so wonderful. It's just, it's state level. Our athletes, they are so they always get, I don't know how many titles they get. And it's just, you name it, in AB. Everything is so wonderful, so great. And not just the SAT score. That just so many different way to express AB. It's an excellent community. It's from a teaching and learning perspective, or from anything. And but unfortunately, we cannot get rid of SAT score. Even there are a lot of colleges, they don't want it. They say they don't want it, but they still say, well, they recommended to have it. So I just I hate to hear say, we don't want all those things, but what is teaching and learning going to accept those numbers? And can anyone tell me what is the way to give us a little bit idea of it? I hope there is some way, and other than the scores, but I think score is part of the way to give us some data right now, at least at right now the level. So I think that's part of our learning and teaching goals. But that's not the only goals. I hate to hear, thank you.
I'm going to suggest, looking at the clock, we're scheduled to complete the meeting at 9:30. So do you want, I'm just going to ask you to hold your question so that Peter can get through all of his slides. And then if there are some final thoughts to share, we'll know that we have the workshop ahead of us.
So this next one is about how do we continue to manage the tension as we have greater district-wide strategic coherence with the rich traditions of individualism and autonomy that developed in the various schools. So I think, and I want to just go back to my notes for 1 second on this one to make sure I'm clear on this. I think when we go back in the history of the Acton schools in particular, and certainly post-regionalization with Boxborough, particularly when McCarthy Town became a school and Parker Damon was the principal there, that was really revolutionary, and it actually started the school choice program because they wanted to do an arts integration school, and it was very different than everything else in the community. And so school choice began as a way for parents to either opt into the alternative program or go to one of the other all-traditional schools. And as that came to be, what happened is the schools had increasingly stronger site-based management, and so decisions really rested with the schools. So if you looked at school improvement plans historically, every school really created its entire improvement plan in a silo by itself about what it was going to do to move forward. Over the last few years, there's been increasingly push at the district level to have more coherence, particularly as we've recognized some equity issues around access to programs for our students. And that creates a tension. It's created tension. We were actually just talking about it before as we talked to PTOs about fundraising for classroom assistants. There was a tension around that. It's a tension as we talk about how we're going to allocate supply money in budgets. How do we have key strategic items that we're coherent on while also allowing schools to personalize for their students? And that's fractal in nature. I had a conversation with a principal who said, geez, when I got here, every teacher had their own math program in the school. And I couldn't wrap my head around how that came to be. And I said, well, that's interesting, because when we had a conversation about, why does every school have its own math program? It was, well, because that's how it developed. And so there's this sense, and there's a term called the fractal nature of schools, that the structures at the top make their way through all facets of the system. But how do we make sure we're coherent on the big picture items? Another one, as I look at literacy and mathematics instruction in particular, I think there are areas where we're having inequitable outcomes for our students across some of the schools, and you saw that in some of the MCAS scores that were presented. And I think we need to really think through what are those key items. Like literacy and math are pretty big rocks for a district. Digital learning is a big rock for a district, but there are other big rocks as well, where we need our students to have equitable outcomes, not just the access side of it, and we need to think deeply about that. One of the things that I think is driving some of those inequitable outcomes, we have data systems within the schools at the classroom level to be able to collect some of the data around reading growth and mathematics growth, but what we lack as a district is one cohesive data system. And part of that is because we have different mathematics programs at different schools. Part of that's because we have different reading programs at different schools, which on face value is okay, but there still should be some way to assess how kids grow across all of that. And if you can't figure out how kids grow equitably across your schools at a grade level, to figure out who's on target, what kids need some additional support, and you can't think strategically about how you're going to support students across all schools in the district, then you're missing a real opportunity to continue to focus on equity. But it's not just about access now, it's about the outcomes as well. And then the last one here is something that struck me. We were actually on school committee tours earlier this year, and I remember standing outside the library, and Andrew Shen was talking to us about how he intended to just about be one-to-one with devices at the junior high school. And I asked the question about, well, what are we doing in K through 2 and 3 through 5, and just about every classroom has access in K through 2 to iPads. Just about every student has access to Chromebooks in 3-5 through their classrooms, and then we're headed to a one-to-one environment at the junior high. What happens when students go to high school? Some departments have Chromebook carts, and some teachers have Chromebook carts in their classrooms, but there's no universal plan for that. And if students are living in that type of a digital world through grade 8, what happens next, and what are we preparing them for? Because when it's implemented well, it's not about a device, it's about the type of teaching and learning that takes place because that device happens to be there. It's increased collaboration, it's access to information, students using devices as a tool as opposed to just having a toy in front of them, for lack of a better word. So I think we need to think about how we have a coherent plan for digital learning. And it's not about the device. It's about what's the plan for digital learning as kids progress through the system. And that needs to be coherent. The next one is around inclusivity. And it's the overarching question is how can we foster an increased culture of inclusivity? I'm not hedging where I stand on this. And best leverage our resources in order to support an increasingly diverse student population in a more inclusive environment. So one thing I noticed, and I've talked with our leadership team about, I noticed our definition of equity right now is only about access. Should that expand? Is there something more to equity than just giving access to programs and curricula? And what do we want to make sure that, how we define that so we're holding ourselves to the right standard? That's one thought. How do we establish and communicate a clear vision and the necessary supports for inclusive practice and ensure that beliefs around inclusive practice permeate both regular and special education settings? As I've gone in classroom visits, one thing that stood out to me is the number of students who are actually pulling out of the general education classroom to provide services and supports and content instruction at times outside of that general education setting. And oftentimes, I'm going to use the word often because I am seeing it often, that's with maybe a teacher who doesn't possess a license in that content area. And what is the opportunity lost to that student, even if they're with a really talented individual? What's the opportunity lost to that student not only to receive content instruction from a content teacher, but also to be able to engage with their peers in that type of content instruction, I think is incredibly important. There are a lot of strategies that we can use to provide a more inclusive education for students and make sure that they have access to fully licensed teachers when they're getting content instruction. That's incredibly important. And I think that shows up in our test scores that you see on an annual basis. But even more importantly, it's a philosophical model about making sure that students are educated with their peers and providing that type of access. So that was something I think is a big rock for us to think about. That also bleeds down into that next one, and I don't need to really expand on that, but how do we think about our service delivery model, and how would we know what the most appropriate service delivery model is so that students are receiving content instruction from highly qualified licensed teachers. The last one is something that it started, and I heard it from students, and then I heard it from some families as well, and I saw it through my classroom observations, but they talked, particularly at the secondary level, about some inconsistencies in grading and assessment practices. And also, I think we need to think deeply about when we have multiple levels of courses within a school, particularly at the high school, how do we make sure that they're all rigorous and that they're all providing students access to that really high quality teaching and learning? I always say that cautiously because we want students to always be at the right level, but we also need to make sure that when students are in their classes, they're really being provided access to that high-quality education. And so, that's a big one to throw out there. That's a touchy subject for many educators about the number of levels that are appropriate in a school, but I think it's something we need to think about as we're moving forward. 5 is how can we be more proactive in meeting the needs of a fast-growing population of students with increasingly acute and complex social emotional needs. This is something we presented to you very much on Budget Saturday. I don't think I need to tell you a lot of the issues that we're facing. Challenge success, I just want to make sure, because I think one thing that struck me immediately was just how hurt the community had been by the string of suicides that we had and the number of student deaths by suicide, and it was pervasive in people talking about that as a real challenge coming in. Challenge success started before that, and I think that's really important to remember. The school district long recognized that there were increasing levels of student stress and wanted to take some proactive measures to that. That was a lot of the impetus behind doing the challenge success surveys, thinking about start times, thinking about homework. And again, we can disagree on some of the ways the strategies played themselves out, and that's something I talked about earlier, but a lot of it was around thinking about the social and emotional needs of students. We have responsive classroom that you heard about that has become more prevalent in the elementary schools. Some elementary schools use additional social and emotional curricula to supplement, but the one thing that we are lacking right now is any real sense of a definition of what the actual skills we want students to develop are from a social and emotional standpoint. For example, do we want students to be resilient? And if we want them to be resilient, how do we build resiliency starting at the very earliest grades we have access to students? How do we integrate concepts of resiliency throughout all our academic programs and curricula? And how do we teach that explicitly to our students? How do we know if a student isn't resilient before they develop a mental health issue so that we can actually provide the right supports in time for that student to continue to build those skills and catch up with their similar peers? Resilience is one example because it ties into a lot of the themes I've heard about, but there are a multitude of potential social emotional skills. What are our priorities that we want kids to have, and how can we be proactive in thinking from a curriculum and teaching and learning standpoint about social emotional learning, just like we do about mathematics or literacy? How do we make sure we have the supports in place when students aren't progressing in developing those skills is incredibly important. And how do we have enough continuity to our social emotional learning programs that as students pass through our system, there's a cohesive set of skills and understandings that students come with, and a terminology that when they come from 6 schools to 1 school at the junior high school, there's a common language for social emotional development that students need to have. And then finally, we need to really look hard, and this came out during Budget Saturday, we need to look hard at our staffing levels for counseling and social emotional supports in the schools. And as I said during Budget Saturday, we've looked at staffing models and kind of national norms around those. We meet or exceed a lot of those standards, but a lot of those standards are now shifting because there's a lot of division around, is that really enough? You can see it in the governor's budget proposal that there's a change in thinking around what students really need and what we need to provide. So I think that's something we want to dive into as well. And then the last one is really just about leadership teams, and I just felt I would be remiss if I didn't talk about leadership teams, because nothing can improve from, and I say improve, not because we're coming from a place that things aren't great, but we still want to continue to improve, but nothing can improve without highly performing leadership teams. That is the foundation of all school improvement, is the function of teams. I come from a place, I think the 4th superintendent in 6 years for the district. And it's, it is what it is. And with different changes in leadership come different directions that people take on, and that feeds into some of that tension around beliefs and values and the direction of the district. And so I think from I really think of 2 leadership teams that I function within. One is our senior leadership team, which is our principals and central office administrators. That needs to function as a high-performing team. And then our other leadership team is the school committee. And we need to make sure that, we're all functioning at that same level to provide support for the rest of the district to be able to continue this improvement. I think with school committee, the particular challenge is that as an elected body, you don't have that same sense of stability on an annual basis. You're going to have new members every year that come onto the committee. So one big picture thing for me that I wanted to throw out is, what are the structures that the committee might put in place to ensure long-term sustainability of vision and initiatives and kind of the goals of the district, and how do we make sure that even with changes in committee members, we can maintain that forward momentum that we all want to have. It's incredibly challenging to do, and I don't have an answer, which is why it's a question. But I think it's an important question for all of us to be thinking about. So with that said, just so you know next steps, this is the beginning of kind of that phase 3 of the entry process, where we want to go from questions to figuring out what's causing a lot of the questions and really talk deeply about some of the themes, identify the themes that are going to rise to the top, that we want to tackle. If you ask me, I do not think we should wholesale change our district strategy for improvement. I think the work we're doing around wellness, the work we're doing around equity is incredibly powerful and is on the cusp of making some significant changes. I do think we need to expand and think about teaching and learning. I don't think we need to necessarily have a goal for buildings. It's incredibly important work that has to continue, but there's lots of incredibly important work within a district that has to continue that may not be within our vision and goals, just because we want to keep it about teaching and learning. So with that said, we do want to do a follow-up workshop, which would be an extended period of time for everyone to really dig deep into this and start to talk about that. I actually would like to think about strategies. We might come back to this throughout the spring and into the summer with the committee on an ongoing basis in small chunks at times. I think might be a way of keeping this dialogue going. I'm going to be doing work with the leadership team throughout the course of the spring and summer as well, and I want to think of strategies we can use to have synergy between the work of the leadership team and the work of the school committee, so that we're all, heading in the same boat. I always love the picture. It's, about teamwork, and it's a skull in a river with everyone rowing. And I remember, I've made the joke that, we need to be not only in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, but we need to first make sure we're all in the same river, and not in the middle of the ocean. And that we just happen to pass each other in the night as members of teams. So that concept of team, it's always about the team. It's always about the team. It's always about the team is something I have really tried to drive home as we've shifted into the second half of the year here. I'm very excited about all the work with you, all the work with the SLT in moving this forward. And what this will all result in is coming back to you in the fall with an expanded district strategy. And as I've said, I think there's a lot in there that we need to keep the momentum of and move forward. And I think there's some opportunities to continue growth.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. I want to close with a quote that I grabbed off my desk that has coffee stains on it because I just love it. And when I read the entry plan, it reminded me, because it was so question-oriented, of this quote. And I had stuck it in a drawer, and I had to dig it out. But it goes like this, and it's by Paul Auster, who wrote The True Tales of American Life, which I have not read. I just found the quote intriguing. If your mind is still open enough to question what you are seeing, you tend to look at the world with great care. And out of that watchfulness comes the possibility of seeing something that no one else has seen before. You have to be willing to admit that you don't have all the answers. If you think you do, you will never have anything important to say. So I want to thank you, Peter, for the incredible work and deep thinking that went into this entry plan. Once upon a time, the school committee did have goals and engage in a self-evaluation process, much like the superintendent does and much like teachers do. And, I see a time when this school committee takes that up again. So, all right. Item 10 on the agenda is the school building project update. So, Mary, do you want to take over?
Sure, I'll start. So we are moving forward. We have a big meeting on this coming Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. Yeah, I know I just need to be there. It's on my calendar. Yeah. The building committee will be voting we have to submit the preferred schematic report, or PSR. So that's where it's our preferred, very broad thinking about schematic. So as we told you at the last meeting, the committee has selected the Gates piece of the property for a consolidated school. We will be talking about now, do we do that? Do we do the building in one phase or two phase? And it does affect how you can lay a building out on the property, and therefore the broad design of that building. So we'll be voting that. One thing we thought is important, it's critically important that even though this is work done through a subcommittee, that the whole school committee stays engaged in the process. And as part of that, it's not required, but because we're putting forward a consolidated school and MSBA doesn't do a lot of that, we would like the school committee to show support for consolidating the Douglas School and the Gates School into one school building while maintaining separate educational programs. And so we actually would like the committee to vote on that tonight if they support that consolidation, if they, we, you. Yeah. It's not a written motion. Someone could move it off of item 10.1. Yeah. And I will say, as part of the preferred schematic report, we are updating the educational plan and responding to the questions that MSBA had on that, so that will be in that. And so the material is supposed to be posted tomorrow. I don't know, are we on schedule for that? And so we can be sharing it with all of you as well, and we will as part of our packet for next week's meeting, so that you can be seeing all of that. Yeah.
So I see that the motion is about the Gates and Douglas, and I understand that. Those were the primary, that will be the primary purpose of that school building, but how does the preschool play into that?
So that's a good question. Through this process, the preschool has been a key part of the new building, but there are some concerns, frankly, that the building committee has raised, and so we're looking into some options that will be discussed at Tuesday's meeting. And I can tell you, I don't even know the update on that, so it's going to be hot off the press stuff. The concern is the building is large, so, we have gorgeous property in Acton and in Boxborough, but our gorgeous property is gorgeous because it's so darn wet. And it's creating a lot of trouble for siting, and so the larger the building, the larger the footprint, the harder it is to site. So there's talk about whether we should be pulling the preschool out of that building to make the footprint smaller and to frankly make the cost smaller. But making the cost smaller in some ways is only a delayed cost because we absolutely have to do something about the preschool. And so that the administration is looking at some options. The nice thing about having it and why, frankly, why we have it in the consolidated school is because it's a way to get MSBA reimbursement. MSBA will not reimburse, to our knowledge, just a preschool. So this is a way we get that. But we're looking at whether there are other opportunities. We will be presenting it to the committee. So that's why we actually thoughtfully decided not to say and the preschool, but we will still add it in if that's the decision of the building committee. So.
Jump in on just one
Please.
clarification on that.
Yes.
So for purposes of this vote, though, in this motion, we do not need to include the preschool in that
Right.
because the question from, and I think what the MSBA is really concerned about is, does the school committee support consolidating two individual elementary school buildings into the one building? You can always add a preschool onto anything, and they don't question that.
Right, thank you.
So I just heard the Peter said the purpose of this vote is just if the school committee support two schools building to one building, right? So, but I just try to get clarification from Mary is that why do we want to add this while maintaining separate educational programs? Because I don't I thought this is the purpose that because school building committee already approved the consolidation of the building, right? So I thought the second part is the new purpose, right? Or
The second part is a critical piece, you're right. A lot of districts will consolidate schools and make it one school with one educational program, and MSBA has absolutely no problem with that. But in the research that we did in the early phases of all this, for elementary, the ideal school size, I'm going to try to remember, is like 350 to 450. Yeah, 450. So we are talking about a school of about 1,000 students, and so one elementary school at that size is too large for one, in our minds, educationally, for one educational program. So we really do want the motion to be and maintaining separate educational programs. We think that's a critical piece here. And MSBA, we want to show MSBA that the school committee, as well as the school building committee, supports that.
So,
Mary, this is more of like a high level, do you support the idea of a consolidated school with two separate programs in this district, and not just getting into the weeds on if we agree or disagree on the details of what the outcome will be in terms of either the preschool or the footprint or whatever.
So the crux of this vote is really procedural for the committee, just saying you're aware that we're putting these two schools into one building together, and you support that. That's really what the MSBA is looking for out of this, just to make sure, and it was one of the comments in the PSR that they came back to us on, and they said, are you sure your school committee supports putting two schools into one building? And we said, it's been talked about for multiple years, so
I think,
I'm confident that this is the final approach.
I think Mary didn't answer my
Paul,
question,
your
actually.
question?
Okay, then I didn't understand your question.
So, I want to make it clear, at least speaking for myself, that it's not that I'm just aware of it. I prefer this. I want two different programs.
Well, there's certainly, oh, you didn't? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
Well, my concern, actually, when I asked this question, the emphasis on the different, the maintaining separate educational programs, because my concern is that did the MSBA, say something about, we should not maintaining separate educational program, or
They didn't say we should not, but it's not common to do this. And so they want to make sure that we're deliberately saying we want two separate educational programs within one building.
So they said something.
They asked us to, they said something to the effect of, does the school committee support having two separate educational programs in one consolidated school?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
and there's certainly precedent for that in this district, yes? Okay. Do I hear a motion?
So I'll move to consolidate the future C.T. Douglas and Paul P. Gates schools into one school building while maintaining separate educational programs.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes unanimously.
And I will let Peter or JD talk about the statement of interest.
So I want to thank JD for preparing this statement of interest. He did an exceptional job on this. We sent this also to Chuck from Skanska, just to take a look at it as well, and all he could write back was basically, this is just outstanding. There were a couple minor edits, just some typos that occurred that we've since updated, and Chuck actually got back to us today, and he thought we could list this as the district's priority because Douglas has now already been accepted into the core building program. We want to just confirm that one more time, but that would be the only thing that we're seeking some flexibility that if it's okay with MSBA, we would amend this Blanchard proposal now to become the priority. So, and what I didn't do because it's 9:15 at night was frame this well. What we're seeking to do is your authorization for us to submit on behalf of the committee a statement of interest for the accelerated repair program for the Blanchard Elementary School. This will be an envelope program in which it's primarily doors, windows, and roofs that are going to be replaced. This is a significant upgrade to the Blanchard School. We are not guaranteed acceptance into the program, but because you've already voted the funding mechanism for it, you become very appealing to the MSBA. The funding mechanism is the bond that we're proposing. That pushes us further in the pipeline because one question they always have is if we push this program forward? Are you able to fund it? We have the answer to that already done. So we think we're a good candidate. We want to put it forward. The work certainly needs to get done at Blanchard, regardless of whether we get accepted. We could certainly wait a year and try and submit twice, but we'd like to get that going as soon as possible. So we're just seeking your approval to submit that statement of interest.
Adam?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the thanks for JD for putting this together. What I saw in here was a lot of great use of the work that we've done both on the Capital Improvement Plan Committee, but also taking the work that we had from the Dora and Whittier reports from previous years, and also rolling that in with some of the work that we got through the feasibility study for the school building. So, you know, this extremely complete statement of interest is not just a result of us sort of throwing something at the wall, but having many years of research and reports and work done to be able to put together such a thorough statement of interest.
Now, I apologize if I misheard or didn't hear you correctly, but so in teeing this up, my understanding is this isn't going to be the only accelerated request. We are also looking at Conant for an accelerated. No, right, yeah, not necessarily this year. So, so to be honest with you, in this packet, and there may have been some mention of it before, but this was kind of it had slipped off my radar until I saw it in this packet, because my thinking had been around the accelerated program for the Conant school.
Yeah, so we have 3 repair projects and kind of renovation projects that would all qualify for accelerated repair for the envelope project. The top priority for us is Blanchard, to move that forward first. The second priority, which is probably still 6-7 years out, will be the the R.J. Gray envelope project for the junior high, and then the third would be the Parker Damon roof project. So that's the order. The other 2, there's a significant lag before we need to get to those projects, but this one should be done soon.
And for Conant, we have to be careful until we decide what strategy we want to do. We don't want to do an accelerated repair project and then go for a building project and have to pay back. So we have to be strategic.
Okay, is there a motion? Oh, Beth.
So it's this paragraph here? So I move that we resolve, having convened in an open meeting on February 7th, 2019, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee of Acton and Boxborough, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority a statement of interest form dated February 7th, 2019, for the Blanchard Memorial School located at 493 Massachusetts Ave, Boxborough, Mass., which describes and explains the following deficiencies in priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future for priority 5, which identifies the majority of the roofing system and window systems in need of replacement, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting the statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the city, town, regional school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
I just want to think, I was going to say, can you repeat that, Paul?
Backwards. You want me to do it backwards?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Item 11 is a recommendation to approve a grant gift from the Blanchard PTF organization to the Blanchard School in the amount of $2,490. Do you want to speak to that, or should I just go?
I can just, this is, you mentioned a robotics program at Blanchard.
Yeah.
This is a grant that's supporting that program.
Move to approve with gratitude.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. And last but not least, we come to subcommittee and member reports. Amy?
So we did get a couple comments about the staff recruitment, selection, and appointment. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask that you not take a vote on that tonight, and the policy subcommittee is going to meet on Monday, and we'll discuss it and bring it to you for our next meeting. And let's see, budget, I don't have any update because I wasn't at the 29th, but if someone else, no. So if someone else wants to speak to it.
Nothing, we sort of did a recap of everything that was discussed at Budget Saturday and reflected on the things that were more successful than others, and I think that was about what we talked about, right?
There was one more thing that we are talking about writing a policy on how much we should have in E&D, and I think that would probably also include the stabilization fund. And so the thinking is that the subcommittee, the budget subcommittee, would draft a policy, then pass it to the policy subcommittee, and then it'll come up here.
Adam?
Capital Committee met last, I believe, January 6th. We haven't met since, and we are considering sort of lengthening out the frequency of our meetings, considering the fact that a good bit of our work is done. But we will be checking in regularly.
Thank you. ALG met this morning. Paul, do you want to speak to that briefly?
ALG met this morning. There was not a lot to new that needed to be discussed. I think most of the conversation was around the building project.
Okay. And Boxborough Leadership Forum.
So we haven't met, but I just wanted to say Peter did an outstanding capital presentation to the select board and to the FinCom. I think that it just really kind of will bring them along to support everything we're asking. And he may have mentioned that the bond we're requesting is not a debt exclusion.
Okay, thank you. Just drawing attention finally to item 13.4, the Case Collaborative Family Community News and Resources pages, which I paged through and I just kind of got lost in it. Really great resource. If anyone is looking and asks you, please refer them to this. Everything from classes to what to do with February vacation, adult classes, parenting groups, really comprehensive and a great resource.
I would just highlight the last page of that newsletter. If you ever got to the last page, it has an excellent description of how language matters.
Thank you.
Also, the EDCO annual report is in your packet. This is a requirement that we provide this to you on an annual basis. Just so you know, we will be coming to you for a vote regarding EDCO on their Articles of Agreement coming up on, I think it was March 7th. We've scheduled that vote. Winchester had dropped out, I think about 2 years ago from EDCO, and EDCO, you already voted the new articles, but when they were submitted to DESE had some feedback for EDCO that they wanted some things changed because their regs changed in between the time EDCO drafted their articles and between the time they submitted them. So surprise, surprise. So we'll be revoting those, but the Board of Directors has approved and they just need to be forwarded to every school committee, so we'll be coming back to you. But EDCO is a great opportunity as well. Those of you who may be new to the committee, we have two collaboratives we belong to. One is CASE, one is EDCO. As I get information, I will continue to forward that. That's something I'd like to get better at, is keeping you in the loop about what's coming out of the collaboratives.
Okay. Motion to adjourn? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening.